sign on the dot, at least in those days, you had to sign on the dotted line. So yes, of course I was. But I was kind of a fish out of water, as were most of the guys in the Old Testament department back in those days. That at Dallas Seminary, yes, I was a dispensationalist, premillennial, pre-tribulationist, the whole nine yards. That system seemed very coherent to me, and a coherence of a system was very important. Otherwise, what authority could that perspective have? So I really was grasping for certainty, and thought I had it.
Which is interesting, because when you look back amongst Bible-only Christians, often it is the consistency of the way that we could interpret that carried with it this underlying idea that it was authoritative, because it held together.
It held together. It was coherent.
And therefore, it must be true.
Right.
Because it seems, and then when we'd find something that didn't fit, I know, like Dallas was kind of a center of the rapture ideas.
Yes.
That wasn't quite as strong where I went to my seminary. Gordon Conwell was evangelical, but it was more covenant.
Yes.
If you ever heard Scott Hahn,
Sure.
basically where Gordon Conwell was heading with that. And the only reason I bring these two seminaries up, I know one time I tried to decide between the two, but they represent two streams of Protestant theology for whom within those streams they believe it all holds together.
Yes.
And therefore authoritative, but they don't mesh.
They don't mesh because they have different views of the church, and especially the church vis-a-vis Israel in the Old Testament, whereas Dallas Theological Seminary would have made a clear distinction between God's program for Israel and God's program for the church. Other strands of Protestant evangelical theology would tend to see them more closely combined, which actually I think is more of a Catholic view, and that's
but
what
the church is the continuity of the people of God of the Old Testament. Dispensational would have said, no, that ended, a new dispensation had begun.
Right.
Even to the fact that the church was an afterthought of God.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. Well, which is, I wouldn't say an afterthought, but they would stress a continuity, but it would not be near as much of a continuity as we hold in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I didn't want to caricature that.
That
was not my goal. My goal was to actually point out, in a way, the problem where you have two systems.
Right.
Deeply committed to Scripture.
Sure.
Evangelical. Surrendered completely to Jesus. The authority of Scripture. And it's the tightness of their arguments that form the foundation for their belief in authority.
Right.
But they're contradictory.
And the reason that I ultimately found them both to be wanting was because they were both overly intellectual. They were both overly conceptual, and they lacked what I came to discover as the sacramental reality of the church, that Christ actually gave to the apostles, the grace that could be then passed on to their successors, and that subsists in the Roman Catholic Church. This was important for me to embrace the reality of it, because I came to be suspicious of the variety of conceptualizations that I had been exposed to.
No, let's jump there too fast, though.
Okay.
So there you are experiencing a crisis as a pastor.
Right.
And I always consider that unique in the sense that I know converts who were academic, they loved the argument. It became an intellectual crisis. But what's unique for clergy is that it's more than an intellectual crisis. We're talking about vocation, family, authority, who you are as a Methodist senior pastor. Senior pastor meaning you're head of a church with a staff and all 9 yards. Where was your wife in all this?
Well, she was a solid evangelical Protestant, just like I expected her to be when I married her. And she was observing these struggles that I was going through, but was very patient with me. And
was she on the? I mean, did she get it?
No, I couldn't talk to her about it. You see, it was very much tied in with my spirituality, and of course with one's personality. And early in a marriage, you set boundaries of the kinds of places where you feel comfortable talking about things. Some things you don't. So it was. She was watching. She was noticing. But she wasn't sharing the journey with me at that point.
See, one of the reasons I bring this up,